In this video, we're going to go over how to persist your browser state if you're using Puppeteer or Playwright. When you're automating and close a browser, the whole process dies, and none of the session state is persisted by default. It can get a little tricky to persist your browser state from one browser automation to the other, but Browserless has two different methods for you. They both keep your browser state alive, but they work differently and suit different use cases, so stick along to know which one's best for you. In short, we have standard sessions and persisting state. You can go over these two approaches and see which one is best for you, but the most important ones is how you set it up. One is mid-script and one is before connecting. The session lifetime of a standard session is from a few seconds to a few minutes, whereas a persisting state will allow you to persist the browser state from hours to a few days. So if you need a longer running state, I would recommend that you use persisting state over the standard sessions. So the standard session is only supported in Puppeteer because browser.disconnect method is not supported in Playwright. So if that's a showstopper for you and you need to use Playwright, then you should go ahead and just use persisting state. Otherwise, standard sessions can still be quite useful for you. So let's go over the stats for a standard session workflow. First of all, you'll need to connect with Browserless, and for that, you'll need an API key. You can grab one from your Browserless account, or you can create a free account today in our sign up page. So basically, you'll just connect normally to Puppeteer, sending the browser WebSocket endpoint, and connect to the first tab opened in your page, create a CDP session that will allow you to communicate to your browser session. And once you're connected, you can go ahead and navigate to a website, do whatever you need to do with your code, and then you're ready to reconnect. Just use the CDP client that you created and send the browserless.reconnect command to Browserless. This will return a browser WebSocket endpoint that you can use to reconnect later. If you're using the standard sessions, make sure that you use disconnect and not close. If you use browser.close, the browser is going to fully close and discard all browser state. If you disconnect, it's actually going to stay alive in the backend. Step 3, reconnect to the session. So now that you have your browser WebSocket endpoint from the step number 2, feel free to puppeteer.connect to that browser WebSocket endpoint and just find the page you were working on and you can resume whatever you were doing. If you want to reconnect again in the future, you'll have to create another CDP session and then create another browser WebSocket endpoint. You can continue to do this as much as you want. But remember, you can't use the same browser WebSocket endpoint to connect. You'll have to create a new browser WebSocket endpoint to connect to in the future if you want to continue to reconnect. Now, if you want to close a session, you can go ahead and use the browser.close method. And just as an extra precaution, you can go ahead and clear the local storage, the session storage, and delete your cookies. And make sure that all of this state is deleted before you close the browser. So persisting state is a little bit different, but it allows more control through HTTP requests to create and delete a browser state. Let's go over the steps of a persisting state workflow. So first of all, you'll have to create a session. Again, remember you'll need an API key, so grab one from your Browserless account. And to create a session, it's via a REST API call. So here I'm just setting the TTL, which is the time to live, basically 3 minutes. It's gonna create a browser in our cloud, and it's gonna return a session connect and a session stop that you'll need in the future steps. Step 2, connect to the session. Since the step 1 gives you a connect URL, you can use that as a browser WebSocket endpoint, just do your automation normally. Step 3 is to close a session. Once you're finished, you can keep disconnecting or closing the browser, and the browser state will be persisted on the cloud. So even if it's not the same browser instance, if you launch a browser on our cloud using the same session connect, it will load the browser with the same sessions, cookies, local storage, etc. Now, if you want to actually terminate that browser state, you'll have to use the session.stop URL from step 1 and run an HTTP request to permanently delete all the session and its data. Remember that you can also keep the browser session alive. It will only be available in Puppeteer since Playwright does not support browser.disconnect. So let's run some code for standard sessions. So let's say you're trying to connect to Proton Mail. The sign-in page will ask for a user and password. Once you click on sign in, it's typical that sites will ask for two-factor authentication. So if you're doing this on two different processes, you might want to split your code in the login process and then in the waiting for a second-factor authentication code. And you can use the browser WebSocket endpoint to reconnect to the browser that's waiting for the two-factor authentication code that your user will provide. So I'll just put my username and my password, click on login. And so what it's doing now in the backend is it's actually typing in my credentials, waiting for a second factor authentication page. At this point, the browser WebSocket endpoint has already been created by the CDP reconnect message. And now it's telling me how much time I have in order to enter my 2FA code. You can update the user that you're verifying the 2FA code. So you can see my Proton Mail is logged into. So for the demo purposes, I put a button that will refresh the screenshot. What it's doing under the hood is reconnecting to that browser and taking a new screenshot, then creating a new browser WebSocket endpoint so they can refresh again in the future. So now I click on logout, which will trigger a browser.close, and that will delete all the browser state. So I won't be able to reconnect to it anymore. Now let's check out what we're doing on Persisting State. I'm gonna run this Express app. So it's the same approach. The user will give you your username, the password, they'll click on login. Once the 2FA code is detected, you'll prompt your user to give you the 6-digit code. Once they input that, you'll verify it programmatically in the backend. Once you're logged in, you can take a screenshot. But this time, it's available for up to 7 days. In fact, you can refresh the whole page and it will let you know that there's an existing session found. It just needs to refresh the screenshot. You'll be able to get a new screenshot of the website. The persisting state works a little different because the browser is not actually alive in the backend. Every time it takes a screenshot, it's actually closing the browser and just opening a new one and navigating to the inbox. Since the cookies are set, it's already logged in and you're able to take the screenshot. This state can persist for several days, so if you want to close it prematurely, just click on delete browser state. It's going to log out and clear all the browser state through a delete HTTP request, deleting the session state. As you've seen in this video, both approaches are solid. Just make sure you've used the right one for you. You can find links to the documentation down in the description. I hope this was useful. Let us know if you have any questions in the comments. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.